also think that it just brings back so much when people step back into the theater on this fifth movie. They're going to feel the same. They're going to see a character that they kind of felt like they grew up with.
Don't look at it. Shut your eyes, Marion. Don't look at it no matter what happens.
I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.
Hello there. Price of Reason here with a movie review. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is a movie that most people never really asked for. With original producer George Lucas and original director Steven Spielberg not creatively involved in the movie, Disney Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy solely in charge of its production, and an 80-year-old Harrison Ford returning to the iconic role, the prospects of this movie were never going to be very good right out the gate. Still, as a moviegoer, you always have a glimmer of hope, however small, that perhaps a movie won't be as bad as its trailers and press suggest. Unfortunately, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny plays out even worse than expected, and in my opinion, at least when it comes to high-profile big studio production, it is one of the worst movies of all time. And while I'm certainly not the only critic to describe it as such, one aspect of this movie that most reviewers aren't focusing on is its anti-American agenda. In this video, I will start with a detailed analysis of the movie's messaging, followed by a more traditional critique of the movie itself. As usual, I hope to give a unique and different perspective on the movie, and if you like this sort of content, make sure to subscribe and get notifications. And with that out of the way, let's begin. During the 1980s, in many ways, Indiana Jones was the ultimate male cinematic hero. He was smart, adventurous, confident, ambitious, masculine, rugged, and heroic. People found him compelling and relatable, which is why this character resonated so well with audiences. In addition to all of this, Indiana Jones was also very much an American hero. During the first 4 Indiana Jones movies, it was always presented as a clear good versus evil scenario. Indiana Jones was always up against non-American bad guys that supported bad ideologies. This is especially clear in both Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade, where Indy, the American hero, battles evil German soldiers of the 1930s and 40s era. Now, I would call these evil German soldiers by their historical name, but since this platform frowns upon using the most accurate term to describe them, I will simply refer to them in this video as German mustache men. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny starts off by seemingly continuing the spirit of those classic Indiana Jones 80s films, where he's the exact type of hero that we remember. In a 15-minute flashback segment where they've de-aged Harrison Ford, he's battling the German mustache men just like he used to, and those early moments in Dial of Destiny are the only ones that actually resemble a real Indiana Jones movie. However, as we've grown accustomed to from Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm, it's actually just one big bait and switch. Once the movie jumps forward to 1969, in true Disney fashion, a new agenda is inserted to replace the old one from right under the viewers' noses. You see, Voller, a German mustache man that we previously see Indy encounter in the 1945 flashback, is now working for the U.S. government, and after Voller has personally sent Neil Armstrong to the moon, the U.S. government has given Voller access to government agents and also given him carte blanche to kill U.S. citizens for no apparent reason. Not only that, then U.S. President Richard Nixon is extremely eager to meet with Voller, but Voller has so much power that he just keeps blowing off a meeting with the U.S. President because he's too darn busy looking for the Dial of Destiny. You see, the US-backed Voller wants to go back in time to ensure that the Germans win the Second World War, and he's doing it with a toxic male American agent who wants to help him do so for some reason. And of course, in an odd, twist, a more sympathetic and diverse woman is working alongside the American agent trying to stop him from doing bad things, but she's overpowered by him, and by the time she uncovers his alliance with Voller, a German mustache man, the toxic male agent kills her. Curiously, the more sympathetic female agent heavily resembles the look and style of women who were active in the activist Panther movement of the late 60s, and I suspect that this is by design. And to have all of these figures pop up at one point in the movie amidst a very patriotic red, white, and blue celebration, it almost seems like a very cynical creative choice. As if the movie is trying to tell us that all these patriots are celebrating America, but little do they know that they're actually celebrating German mustache men. To clarify my point here, after 4 movies of featuring an American hero in overall pro-American movies, under Disney Lucasfilm, the Indiana Jones franchise seemingly goes full-on anti-America. And to make matters worse, in order to achieve this new messaging, Disney Lucasfilm's movie takes extreme liberties with actual historical events. While nobody is claiming that the previous 4 Indy movies were necessarily realistic, but certain historical facts and events were at least pretty much adhered to in the big picture. In Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Disney Lucasfilm basically rewrites history in order to seemingly push a very specific anti-American agenda. Yes, historically there were German mustache men scientists that the US utilized to gain an edge over Russia after the Second World War, and yes, they even contributed to the space program. But in no way, shape, or form did they call all the shots, nor were they given the power to hunt down US citizens, and while their work for the American government may be considered a touchy subject on a few different levels, the way they appear in Dial of Destiny completely ignores the historical context of why they were ever recruited to begin with. Historically, the US government needed their expertise to deal with major security and military threats, and while it's also true that Nixon was a controversial Republican president, but to be fair, Nixon didn't actually initiate the involvement of German mustache men in NASA's space program, nor did he ever give them carte blanche to kill US citizens on US soil. And to somehow tie these things together in the way that this movie does, along with the presence of an American toxic male German mustache enthusiast versus a more diverse late 60s type of activist lady, this all feels very disingenuous to me. And the part that probably bothers me the most is this not so clever, sneaky underlying message that somehow, if you like America, that must mean that you like German mustache men. In addition, this movie also has other anti-patriotic themes cleverly woven into it. At one point in the movie, Voller discriminates against a server by oddly mocking him for serving his country. I can understand Voller discriminating against the guy since he's a German mustache man, but I highly doubt that he'd ever bring up the guy's US military service and imply that the US hasn't done right by him. Even if for some reason this topic were to appear in this movie, I just don't think this character is the person that would bring it up to the other character. To me, it seems like when he brings it up, it's purely an injection of agenda into the screenplay and nothing else. In addition, Indy's mourning of his son who dies in Vietnam also seems shoved into the movie again to present the US in a negative light. It obviously also takes a dig at capitalism at one point, with it being equated to stealing, implying that perhaps communism is good. Now I know that some of you may be asking, what's the problem with all these creative choices? It's just a movie. Can't Disney Lucasfilm, who owns the franchise, take it in whatever new direction it wants? Isn't it possible that Indiana Jones in his old age isn't pro-America anymore? Isn't it possible that he's an old loser and bum whose wife wants to divorce him? Isn't it possible that he's sad because he lost his son in Vietnam? And my answer to that is both yes and no. Yes, Disney Lucasfilm can make all of these creative decisions as its heart desires to fit with its preferred political agendas and ideologies. Yes, Disney Lucasfilm can make Indy a loser and a bum, and yes, it can make him no longer pro-America. The only issue is, once you make such fundamental changes to the DNA of a franchise's iconic character, in many ways it ceases to be that franchise any longer, and by using this approach, you run the risk of alienating the exact paying customers that made the franchise valuable to begin with. Sadly, Disney Lucasfilm has been taking its customer base for granted for years now, and that's why it continues its ongoing and steady decline. We've already seen this happen with the Disney Star Wars sequel trilogy that was repurposed to be Smash the Patriarchy propaganda. We've already seen it happen with the Disney Willow sequel series, which seems to focus more on identity politics rather than Willow himself. And now it was apparently time for the Indiana Jones IP to be converted into an anti-American pro-commie propaganda piece with a twist of Smash the Patriarchy. And while Disney Lucasfilm and the Access media have repeatedly tried to pin these failures on disappointed customers being ists and phobes, at the end of the day, Disney Lucasfilm is supposed to be running a business, and talk is cheap. If you're releasing a movie and you take your repeat customers for granted, eventually, they won't care about your movies anymore. Aside from the messaging, every other aspect of this movie is a failure too. The writing can best be described as embarrassing. It's likely that with all of the movie's rewrites and reshoots, James Mangold, who otherwise is actually a decent director, wasn't able to cobble together a movie that makes any sense. As a result, it feels like a mix of Rise of Skywalker and The Last Jedi storytelling, which is never what you want your movie to be. The Indiana Jones character seems like an old fool throughout most of the movie. The insufferable Phoebe Waller-Bridge character, Helena Shaw, is very poorly written and feels completely out of place in this movie. In addition, Waller-Bridge is also not well cast in a role. The movie is way too long and even extremely boring in parts. As a viewer, you're never really invested in any character or the story for that matter. The whole movie seems like a bunch of random scenes stitched together very poorly, and don't even get me started about that little kid that steals a plane and flies it back in time to ancient Rome. Even for a fictional escapist movie, nothing here comes together in a satisfying way. In fact, throughout most of this movie, you just want it to end already, which it eventually does with a last-minute reshoot scene that includes Marion, Ravenwood, and Sallah, but makes no narrative sense whatsoever. While I give credit to both the 80-year-old Harrison Ford, who tries his best to work with the material he's given, and to John Williams, who does his best to score this movie at 91 years old, there is absolutely nothing either of them can do to save the movie from being a complete disaster. There's a reason why the movie is already considered a box office flop. The only silver lining for me is that at least nobody can pin this failure on George Lucas or Steven Spielberg. They knew why they wanted nothing to do with this movie. This is very much a Kathleen Kennedy production, and at the end of the day, it's yet another failure that she can add to her abysmal track record as president of Lucasfilm. No matter how she or her people try to spin this failure in the access media, the disaster that is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny will always be a part of her legacy. What did you think of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny? Did you love it? Feel free to let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel and also clicking on that wonderful notification bell. Thanks for watching, my friends. Thank you, and good day.
I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.